Today, we're going to be talking with Regan Archibald. He is one of the leading peptide specialists in the nation. You guys, peptides are getting a bad rap, so I'm super excited for him to be on today and to be talking with us about the work that he's doing and how truly this can be an incredible natural resource. What's even more amazing is Regan is right in our backyard here in Utah and has 2 clinics that were founded, and he is the author of 8 books, including Never Stop Healing and Your Health Transformed. So Regan, welcome to the podcast today.
So good to be here, Bonnie. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So your story really began at a young age, but it didn't really come to light what this gift was going to be till a lot later. So give us some insight at the beginning. And I know your book touches on it in detail, and we want people to read that, but give us a short excerpt that led you into what you're now doing with the incredible work of health and wellness.
Well, I think, one of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, he says, your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your brain is looking for. Mm. And so for the last 20 years, I've looked for the world's best therapies that can get people unreasonably healthy in the shortest amount of time. And I've learned that there's different pathways of getting us there. And so one of my fascinations with it is when I was growing up, my grandmother, who was super inspirational to me, I started getting extra birthday cards in the mail from her. And I was like, why is grandma just hooking me up, or what is this? And I was a teenager at the time. And then I noticed she started forgetting people's names. And then I realized, oh no, grandma has Alzheimer's.
Oh no.
And so, here's this incredible woman who's an entrepreneur in the 50s and had like multiple businesses and just super dynamic. And then to see her health start to deteriorate. So I started reading books on brain health and started learning about ginkgo and all these things. And then I read a book on vitamin C and the only way I could get out of farm work, I grew up on a farm in Idaho. The only way I could get out of farm work is if I made the basketball team, the football team, or the track team.
To take you out of the small town in the country.
Yeah. That was it. My dad's like, well, you either make the team or you're going to be working. And so I'm like, well, I'd rather be in practice than working or on the road for a game. But one game I gave the entire team 8 grams of vitamin C. And that was my first foray into natural medicine. But it was
so wait, you gave your team vitamin C. What was their reaction?
Reading a book on it, I was like, vitamin C is amazing for endurance. But I didn't know the dosing. And so I'm like, hey, I've got all this vitamin C. And so I started distributing it, and we all ended up with diarrhea. So we lost the game. It was too high of a dose.
So just so we're on the same page, what's a good dose of vitamin C that should be recommended if it's not
maybe
8 grams?
Like 2 grams.
2 grams. Okay, at the max. Yeah. So all of you listening, it's 2 grams, not 8.
Yeah, and it depends on the type of vitamin C, and most vitamin C is garbage. It's just ascorbic acid. So what they do is they take cornstarch and heat it up, and then it's that antioxidant, the ascorbic acid, that gets kicked off from it that they put into a pill form. But anyway, we won't get into that.
Yeah. Keep going.
From a young age, I was just always looking for ways to optimize brain health. I had a goal in high school. I didn't want to have any homework. So when the bell would ring, I'd finish my homework right there in class, turn it in. My teachers were just like, "Urgh." And but it was just a goal I had. And so I always wanted to make sure my brain was working really well. And I had an uncle who was a doctor, and I said, I want to be like him, because I didn't want to be a farmer. That was the first thing I knew when I was growing up. And so I ended up at the University of Utah Medical School, or the pre-medicine there. And I got really sick, and I started noticing that I was gaining weight. I was falling asleep in class. I had massive brain fog, so bad that I couldn't think until about 7 o'clock at night. And then my brain would turn on for a couple hours.
So you start noticing heavy cognitive depletion.
That's it. Yes. And then I realized, after going to 5 doctors at the U, I was like, they're all giving me the same diagnosis. They're saying I've got too much stress. And I realized, I've got to try something else. So I went to a naturopathic doctor who ran the right labs.
So wait, what age were you at this before you started to transition?
It's about 21.
Okay.
And so, I was skeptical of natural medicine, and I was like, but I didn't have any answers. And so I finally, went to this naturopathic doctor who ran the right labs, and he's like, oh, you've got Hashimoto's. My thyroid peroxidase antibodies were 680. And so that's when I started realizing my problem was an autoimmune problem, had nothing to do with stress or anything else. And the autoimmunity was caused by all the chemicals I was exposed to being on a farm, moving sprinkler pipe, being sprayed with Roundup, and just handling a lot of chemicals. So that was my first introduction into a whole new world of medicine. And I'm so glad it happened because, Bonnie, how many transformations have you had in your own life because of pain that you experienced on some level?
You know what? You said it well right there. People really don't look at change or look to think to do something differently unless it's painful or they're forced to change or they just don't like the way they feel. And, for me, coming to your clinic, which for those listening, I'm going to start working with Regan a little closer, which I'm really excited because my journey had been the same thing. I was at first for aesthetic reasons. I wanted my body. I thought health looked like if I looked a certain way, I was healthy. So then I ate a certain way to achieve that. And once I got there, I went, well, I've eaten this way, but I still don't feel good. And I emotionally and mentally and spiritually don't feel good. So I'm missing pieces. And I love that about your program is you're not just addressing, the Hashimoto's with just a stress. You're addressing it with mindset in your programs. You're addressing it with nutrition and your supplements that you provide at East West. I've seen a genre, and we're in the supplement business, and yours have an incredible quality to them.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And my favorite is, when I ended up going to school in Hawaii, I studied at a school that was founded by Earl Bakken. So it was an integrated medical school, not conventional medicine. And when I got back, I kept looking for those, what are the best therapies that can really change a person's life? Because I've got three core philosophies. Philosophy number one is I believe when health improves, everything improves. And I bet you could look at every aspect of your life. And, as you guys are leveling up with real ketones, you guys are doing amazing things there. But this is where I see your founders. They're starting to level up their health. You're starting to level up your health because you want to get to the next level. So many people try to get to the next level and they leave their health behind. And like I just had a client here from Austin, Texas, and he has built a massive, almost $1 billion business, but he did it at the expense of his health. So for 12 years, his health has taken the back seat.
I'm so glad you led into that. Keep going, because I have a question to that.
Yeah. And he was basically 50 pounds overweight, didn't know if his wife was going to hang on to him. He created his financial success was, pretty unmatched, but he didn't care about it anymore. He just wanted his health back. It's that old saying is, the person who has their health has 1,000 wishes. The person who doesn't have their health has one wish. So, yeah. What were you going to say on that, Bonnie?
No. So I love that you went there because I have noticed that, and power perseverance, if you're listening to anybody listens to the intro, it's how long of our life do we spend hustling, searching money? We think that once we achieve this material possession, all of a sudden we have our health too. And most people spend the next half of their life spending their earned finances, money, wealth to have holistic wealth. And truly, why do we want to wait till we're sick? Why don't we just want to choose better? If once we know better, why don't we choose it before it's detrimental? And in your case, you didn't feel good. You had all these brain issues. And so then you started to explore that. But what's incredible is it really was a gift, I think is how you've described it to me before, is this gift allowed you the opportunity to find ways. And now you've got these clinics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because what I wanted to do is, and I think any person that's been through their own suffering, we want to help others avoid the same process, right? Yeah. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the time and the age that we live in. And you and I were just talking about how cool it is we live in Utah because Utah, for those of you who are outside of Utah, it's the coolest little pocket for all these innovations going on.
All of it, yeah.
A lot of people think it's misleading because it's a state with just over 3 million people. They can't be doing that. Half of them are rednecks.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here that's pretty phenomenal. I mean, in the regenerative medicine world, anti-aging world, I'll be speaking at a conference in September called Da Vinci 50.
Yes.
And it's a very exclusive longevity people. And so we need to make sure you and Rob are there. And Gary.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get those dates for you and then we'll post them with this podcast, but I want to be there.
Yeah. Yes. We love these events, but one of the things we're doing is we're bringing in the world's best scientists and researchers, and right here in Utah, there's a lot going on. But where it starts is you saying, okay, is this my rock bottom? Can you make today your rock bottom so that every day you just start improving your health? So rather than waiting until you look in the mirror and you're like, who's that fat dude? Or how did I get so neurotic about my health? When you're in your bodybuilding days, you're just like, oh no, my body fat percentage, it went all the way up to 9,
I bet 9 instead.
And I'm like, don't worry, you're just menstruating. It's part of, you're retaining
you're
water.
just on your, I know. That's a huge thing too. It's not where I really want to go, but I think that's important for people to understand. And maybe you have insight, but people interpret weight gain and weight loss to associate it with body fat. And it's not necessarily always body fat. Carbohydrates hold water, your minerals hold water, everything holds water. So it's going to fluctuate based off of that. So I think a mindset around just focusing on the internal health, you're going to naturally lose that body fat. But on to my next question. You head to medical school and then you decide you're not going to. Why?
Well, I just changed. I did. I mean, I stayed in medicine, but I wanted to get an education that was more holistic. Once I learned about the pharmaceutical complex, and that in medicine, the whole goal is to diagnose a disease. And then once you've diagnosed a disease, then pharmaceutical companies are spending billions of dollars every year trying to find that blockbuster drug that people can stay on the rest of their life. You think back into the early 2000s, it was Viagra. Before that, it was, birth control pills were like massive for a certain period of time. I mean, we've had these blockbuster drugs, and that's really what keeps the pharmaceutical companies in business. But it's not built around health. It's like, let's treat a symptom. And then like blood pressure, you don't go to your doctor and he checks your blood pressure and he's like, hey, Bonnie, by the way, your blood pressure is, it's 150 over 90. We need a, why is that? It's like, well, here's lisinopril, or here's some type of diuretic to lower your blood pressure. It's not, let's figure out why it's there in the first place. And I've always been fascinated with the why. And I also saw that there's another medical model out there. And this leads to my second belief system, which is no death by neglect. I think in our culture, the medical model has given us instant gratification. If you have a problem with your health, all you need is a prescription and then your health problems go away. And I believe that's death by neglect, because you're not owning your health. You're not taking full responsibility for your health. You're putting it into somebody else's hands. And the problem in that thinking is we have this condition called polypharmacy syndrome. And that's where if you're on 5 or more medications, you've got a 100% chance of having an adverse reaction from those medications. So you don't even know why you feel like crap. It's like, well, is it the treatment or is it the disease? And that's what William Osler, he's the academic dean at Yale's medical school. And he says, in medicine, you always have to recover twice, once from the disease and once from the treatment.
Well, because I would imagine that your body has to consistently cleanse those out because they're not natural processes.
That's right. Yes. And so, this is where, no death by neglect is not only thinking about what you're taking. And this is where I love peptides, because they're naturally occurring in the body. And if you get it from the right source, they're some of the cleanest medicines you can use. But then the other thing, no death by neglect, is making sure you're getting the right tests ran. And so this is where we have our comprehensive functional blood chemistry panels that look at all the longevity markers. And when we read your blood labs, we're going to narrow the ranges so that it's not standard. And so standard ranges is where it's 90% of the population. They're taking general averages, and you're being pigeonholed with 90% of the population, where in the United States, 60+% of us have at least one chronic disease. And so it's just not accurate. And so what we do is there's a scientific committee, and they're constantly fine tuning these markers so you can see what's optimal and what's not optimal. And so go ahead.
No, so I wanted to pose. So when you talk about these biomarkers, there's a lot of people that will go to their regular physician, or for example, I went in for my annual and they did my blood work and they said, you are doing great. And your amazing team said, these are just average ranges. And I think that is so important that people shouldn't base it off of just a general panel. That's so key. Like, you look for very specific things in the blood work to be able to prescribe and do what you guys do there.
That's it. Yeah, because if we just do it off the general panel, then it's a watch and wait. So how many of you have gone and you've had your blood labs ran and you're like, I just don't feel right. Like, my energy's not right. I'm getting, lightheaded, whatever your symptoms may be. And you look at your blood work and it's a watch and wait game. Well, this is off. Like, your hemoglobin A1C is 5.7, but it's not a big deal. Let's wait and see what it looks like next time. And so our model is like, well, if there's no death by neglect, then you're neglecting the reason why it's there. And if you're not addressing the cause, 5.7 means there's some insulin resistance. So let's get rid of sugar. Let's make sure that you've got some exercise, because exercise allows for that GLUT4 transportation. Let's train your body on how to get into ketosis. And that's where you guys are amazing. So you just have to look upstream a little bit. The CDC says 75% of all diseases in the United States are preventable. And
they are, and taking it on your own without somebody who has a bigger perspective, I think, like you said, it just takes so much longer. And I love that you said, well, if you have a way and you could get there faster, don't you want to have that way, especially if it's more healthy for you?
Right. Yeah. And because so many of us, and this goes to my third philosophy, which is, I want to make the next 10 years your best 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, I'm interested in making, at this stage of my career, practicing for almost 20 years, I want to work with people who are focused on their health for the long run. People who are like, it's not just, hey, I want to fix this for the single event that I've got. My daughter's wedding is what I've heard so many times. And I'm like, well, do you want to just fix it now, or do you want to fix it for good? And if they say, I'm just worried about right now, and I'm like, okay, well, go somewhere else, because I'm not really interested in that. My dad used to say, whatever is worth doing well. And so I'm like, why don't we just get you super healthy for good, and then we'll keep you healthy. And then as technologies come in, you can always optimize. And there's these beautiful longevity treatments that just upgrade your DNA, and they help with cellular expression. And we've seen people look, feel, and perform better than they ever have. And even people in their 70s. I had Linda was here today doing push-ups, and she's in her 70s. So crazy. Actually, she's almost
that right
80.
there is a testament. That right there is a testament that you are never too old to change your lifestyle, ever.
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more. So, and I think if everybody just, takes a step back and says, what advice would you have given yourself 10 years ago when it comes to your health? And, if we look back at our life and you say, man, I think I probably would have relaxed more, stressed less. I would have, taken more time to rejuvenate my body. I would have done a few more workout, whatever it might be.
More self-care is what I'm hearing you say.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
All of the above. Yeah.
Have you noticed the clients you've worked with, and then we're going to get to your next step, but I would imagine every person that's come to your clinic that commits to it for the long haul also levels up their income by just fixing their health and mental game.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because, when health improves, everything improves, business improves, relationships improve. Think about how dynamic it is being around someone who's healthy versus someone who's not. I think there was a statistic that I read maybe 6 months ago where they found people that were healthy made 25% more than people who weren't healthy.
So right there, if you think you have to hustle harder, maybe just give yourself more self-care and watch your income grow. Seriously, right?
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, what's your next step?
So next step is, for people who are like, hey, I really want to level up, you got to get your blood work ran. And so super easy to do. And this is, and if you've had your labs ran, to your point earlier, Bonnie, it's like, well, I've already ran my labs, but it's usually not the right markers. It's used, we're running 82 plus markers, depending on, who you are and what we need to look at. Most physicals, you're running about 30, maybe half of that if you're lucky. So, so the best next step is get your blood labs ran. And once we read the labs, then we put together the right peptide protocol. So I'm a big fan of peptides because what they do is peptides bind directly on the surface of the cell, and they turn on genes that you want expressed. So once you turn on a particular genetic pathway, like you think of the peptide MOTC, for example, MOTSC is more phenotypically expressed in the Japanese population, who also seem to live the longest. But MOTC, it gets turned on when we're in a hot sauna by heat shock proteins. It gets turned on when you exercise. But you can also use this peptide called MOTC, and you get this beautiful expression of lowering inflammation, specifically tumor necrosis factor alpha, IL-6. You get an increase in skeletal muscle contraction, and then you also get this beautiful energetic bypass pathway opened up called AMPK. So all these peptides work this way. There's a peptide called LL37 that eradicates infection. So if you've got a viral infection that won't go away, or if you've got yeast that won't go away, if you've got bacteria, it selectively targets those particular overgrowths without disturbing the healthy.
Well, I would imagine as you're administrating this, I very much understand why you wouldn't want to do it with somebody who wasn't willing to change their lifestyle, your food, having an exercise regimen, and your mindset. Because if you are literally changing your DNA and, as you call it, turning these on, but you don't change your lifestyle, it's like this big hype that's going on now with semaglutide and some of these other ones where people take them, but they don't change their habits. So they put it back on and then they say it's a scam. It didn't work. Well, no, you just didn't incorporate the full changes to really benefit your life. So yeah, you might get in a sauna and it helps, but how cool is it if you take the peptide, hop in the sauna, and you increase it 100-fold?
Yeah. There you go. Yes. And that's where the controversy is in peptides right now. They're beautiful medicine. A lot of people don't realize the first peptide was insulin back in the 1920s and life-saving. But you think of semaglutide, in my opinion, it's just as life-saving as insulin was 100 years ago, because we have this obesity epidemic in our country.
And the quick fixes. People want the quick fixes without the repercussions.
Yes. Here's where it went wrong. Here's where I get frustrated with the medical model is it's using Ozempic or Wegovy or Mounjaro, and it's using this pharmaceutical company, and they're giving patients, in my opinion, about 200% higher of a dose than is needed or safe. And then they're leaving them on it chronically without stacking another peptide with it. So we'll always stack like BPC 157 so that you don't lose muscle mass. So people end up being skinny fat on Ozempic.
Oh, yeah.
And so then, of course, when you get off it, if you're skinny fat, you're not going to have any muscle mass, and then you're already in a caloric deficit on it because it delays gastric emptying. So you lose that sensation to eat. And so we want to make sure people are exercising when they're on it. They're getting plenty of protein, at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. And then we also want to stack other peptides on so you have growth hormone that's being utilized. Otherwise, you're going to end up having a whole nother host of problems when you're off the thing.
All right. So you said growth hormone, and I come from the bodybuilding industry. And so when you hear that, people that are familiar say, oh, am I going to look like this? Am I going to have, grow things I don't want growing? Am I going to have hair on my chin if I'm a girl?
Yeah.
Like, I would love for you to touch on how that really doesn't affect if you know what you're doing and working with an expert, but how, I'm a personal trainer. I understand wanting to help, but that's not my expertise. And I find so many trainers recommending or doing those things based off of their reading, their level, but they're just not in that depth. And so it's putting out there, clients on stuff, and then they're going to get a bad rap, right? Yeah. So touch on growth hormone, if you don't mind.
Well, so growth hormone, using exogenous growth hormone, exogenous meaning outside of the body and injecting it, it can be really dangerous. I mean, there's some really positive benefits because growth hormone starts to decline as we age. But when you use peptides, peptides are reminding your body how to produce growth hormone on its own. So, if you think about it, you want to get high on your own supply as often as possible. And growth hormone is no exception. You want to use the chemicals in your brain. I mean, imagine if you can induce GABA without needing alcohol. Your life is so much better that way, right?
So much better.
If you can step into a meditation and you produce anandamide and you don't need marijuana, I mean, it's just so much better for us. And so same with growth hormone, if you can use some peptides, and peptides can help us get there because it opens up those pathways and then your body can mobilize the right nutrients to create the chemical change. But growth hormone secretagogues like tesamorelin, CJC1295, sermorelin, MK677, these are phenomenal peptides because they show your body how to make growth hormone again, but they do it in a way where it's got a very short half-life, like 30 minutes, and you get a 7 times, depending on the study and the person, you can get a 7 times greater pulse of growth hormone, and you can minimize somatostatin, which is what turns off growth hormone. You can inhibit that. And so then what happens is you get the benefits of growth hormone, but you can also go into autophagy, and you also have the mTOR pathway turned off when you're fasted because it's not constantly in your body. So peptides are a great way of enhancing growth hormone without putting your body at massive risks.
So could I take exogenous ketones, which, by the way, are not for just a keto dieter? I take them for my brain health and to get my electrolytes in. But could I do it with, I'm getting asked about fasting a lot. So I could fast, take my exogenous ketones, and then I could take my peptides with you in the morning and then kind of start my regimen there, because it sounds like the optimal time to be doing these things are an empty stomach for maximum absorption.
That's it. Yep. So you can take it. Growth hormone might even be better at night before sleep, like if you're doing sermorelin or CJC, because it does induce delta sleep waves. And if you think about how great you slept when you're a kid and you wake up feeling refreshed, it's the same mechanism. But if you took some ketones, like one that we love here, you have the melatonin with the ketones. That's an awesome combination. There's some real immune building properties with adding in the melatonin in there. And you want to do any kind of growth hormone peptides, you want to do it in a fasted state. So 90 minutes after your dinner. And we have, the 3-2-1 rule. Don't eat 3 hours before sleeping. Don't drink 2 hours before sleeping, and no blue lights 1 hour before bed. And if you follow that philosophy, then you do your growth hormone, your CJC1295, and your ketones, and you're going to have a nice fat burning experience right as you're sleeping.
How nice would that be? Burn fat while you sleep. Who doesn't want that? And no stress. So what is your take on these exogenous ketones outside of course, my belief system? I know you've tried some for yourself, but where you see people maybe using them in conjunction with semaglutide. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce it right. Tryptophan.
Tirzepatide. Yeah, it's all good. So if you think about it, and we do a lot of metabolomics testing. So the organic acids test will show where the body is, how efficient your body can actually use fat or use ketones as an energy source. We can look at your beta hydroxy. Really? Yeah, it's a fast. I just did. I had clients in France, and I was just going through theirs. They came into Utah, and we gave them their kits, and then
I want to do that.
It's a great. Yeah, we'll have it in your protocol.
I love that.
But yeah, we do see when our clients start using ketones, we see that pathway open up.
Okay.
But we also see if someone is in that caloric deficit stage, there is some cognitive decline, even though the GLP-1s are great for the brain. And GLP-1s, when I say that, I mean these classes of weight loss peptides like Ozempic and Wegovy and Mounjaro, tirzepatide or semaglutide or semaglutide. But if you add in ketones, then your body can keep burning fuel in the form of fat versus being in a caloric deficit, where when you're in a caloric deficit for too long, your thyroid starts to shut down and your body will store any excess fat that it has, any excess energy that it has from food, it will store it as fat. And so what ketones do is they allow your body to keep burning fat as a fuel source so that it doesn't put such a strain on your thyroid. So really awesome what you guys are doing as far as the technology goes.
Yeah, I learn. I mean, I think that I know everything, so I just learned something new. I love that. How are you giving back?
Well, that's a good question. I
That was a
educate
real
all.
big change in gears after going from peptides, but
Yeah,
I wanted people to know how incredible a person you are too. So how are you giving back?
well, I mean, yeah, I think the way I do my best to give back is I have all kinds of free content on Medium. For those of you who read Medium articles, I post there. I've got a couple different podcasts, Unreasonable Health, and then Go Wellness Radio. I've written actually 9 books. My newest book is called The Peptide Blueprint.